Hi, welcome to the completed ticket challenge. You've made it to the last week. Good job. If you've been following along, you will have a good process by now in order to you've Hi, welcome to the completed ticket challenge. You've made it to the first day of the final week. Good job. So, if you've been following along up until now, then you'll have done a couple of things. You'll look through all of your recently touched work and made sure that it's all in the right statuses and so on. So, you got some good information, and you have a process uh, which ensures that your work in progress is not growing anymore. You're finishing more work than you're starting, and so y- we've isolated the problem, made sure that the key problem doesn't get any worse. However, we need to kind of clean out the attic, as it were, because we intentionally ignored a lot of the older work last week just to keep things manageable. So in this week, we're going to be looking through that old work, kind of going through the attic, throwing stuff out, and getting things back into a good state. So it's a solid foundation for us. So that's what we're going to be doing throughout this week. Today, here's what you're going to do today. You're going to look through the in progress column. You're going to identify those tickets that are being marked as neglected based on the threshold that you set. That have the little red tag saying, in a certain status for whatever it happens to be, marked as red. And you're going to do a couple of things. First of all, the normal thing that we've been doing is get them in the right status. So you're going to look at what's the next step on this ticket, just like always. Maybe you'll find that the ticket's actually done. It's always a bonus when you can just make your final time entry, final note, send it over to completed. That's always nice. You might find that the next step is to be done by somebody outside the team. Well, you know where to put that. You put that in waiting. It could be that you need to follow up with somebody, and like maybe even the customer forgot about it. So just say, hey, I'm still waiting on you for such and such. So send out a notice like that, put that in the waiting column. If the next step is somebody in the calendar, then you know where that goes. That goes in scheduled, and make sure that there's actually a service call for that or a scheduled assignment, so that it doesn't get forgotten about at the right time. If the next step is somebody in the team, then that's your in progress work. So I don't just want to say, okay, all of that stuff, just work harder, get it done. I have some suggestions for how you can handle that stuff that's still in progress, that's in your court to do. So here's some ideas. Um, if you look at that ticket and you see that it's assigned to somebody who's really busy, just assign it to somebody who's less busy. That can usually be a good technique. And make sure that your work is kind of assigned in a uniform way within your team. That'll definitely help. Now, chances are pretty good that it's assigned to somebody who's busy because they're the only ones that can do it. I wish that didn't happen, but that's kind of a fact of life, right? Um, so what you want to do for that sort of thing is make sure that typically it's like that because it's a complex ticket, and so the senior engineer needs to do it. In this case, make sure that when the senior engineer does it, they pull in a junior engineer. The junior's job is just to watch and document what happens so that next time a ticket like that comes, it doesn't have to be done by the senior engineer. Because when you get a good catalog of documentation for the things that your team does over and over, then you can start to take. That's how you take work away from your senior engineers and allow your more junior engineers to do it. So that's really powerful. Make sure that that happens. Another technique is to we call this swarming the ticket. Basically, you get a lot of people working on that ticket at once, and it's not necessary for just simple tickets. But what's more likely is that you might have a more complex ticket that requires some work from a variety of people, and it's probably just getting neglected because no one's really taking ownership of that. But if you say, "Okay, team, this ticket has been here for a while. I see that it's going to require work from 3 or 4 of you. Okay, so you 3 or 4, that's your responsibility. Work that together until it's done, whether that's 15 minutes or an hour or whatever. Not like an entire day. Probably that would require some planning. But if it's a ticket that can be done in half an hour or an hour or whatever, just tell your team nobody's doing anything else until this is all done. We're swarming this ticket, and you'll get that one knocked out. Another technique is to look at the scope of that ticket very carefully. It could be that the ticket has gotten neglected because a technician was just kind of overwhelmed because it was too big of a ticket. So get in the mindset of the customer and think, what are they really needing out of this? Like, what's the minimum that they need to be satisfied, and only do that stuff. And anything that's above that, um, just scratch that out. Okay, you can always do it later. Sometimes later means never, and in that case, you've saved yourself some work. So really be very careful about the scope of the ticket. Reduce it wherever you can. That'll make it much easier for the technician to do when they start that. Now, this is kind of related. If you look at the ticket and looking at the scope of the ticket, and some of it was complete and some of it was not complete, you can think if it's like that because the technician did kind of a useful bit of work that they delivered to the customer, and then the other parts of the ticket were kind of secondary. Um, then it could be that you can split that ticket into two tickets or maybe more tickets depending on how many. Like, remember what you did for in week one for right sizing the tickets? You can make those considerations here. So it could be that you can split it into two or more tickets, and one of the tickets is done because all of the work for that ticket now is already complete. So you get to complete one ticket there, and the other work doesn't stay in the in progress column. It goes back into the ready column. So this is one of the few times where you essentially move work from in progress back to ready. You can do that because it's actually now you're considering it separate work that you haven't started yet, so it belongs in ready. And you don't really need to worry about it right now. Just make sure that you make sure that it's prioritized in the list of ready work, um, so that you do that at the right time. So that's kind of a trick that you can use there. Now, finally, you might come along and see this ticket is just so old that the customer's probably forgotten about it, and they may not even need it anymore. So either if you can, just if it makes sense to just close that off, go do that. If you need to follow up with the customer to say, I'm not sure if you really need this anymore, then send that message and then put it into the waiting column. And then if they respond, you know what to do. If they don't respond, sometime in the future, you just close that off. Now, with everything that's left in the in progress column, probably in your member swim lanes, everything that's left there, that's work that your team needs to do in order to reduce that work in progress. So you go through all of that and you rank that. Well, someone's got to. It could be that you want to be the one to rank that, so that technicians know what they need to do first, what's the most important stuff. Or it could be that you describe how to do that to your technicians and you just kind of delegate that to them. That's fine too, as long as everybody's got the knows how to do that. And that's how you will now really see your work in progress going down.